Hello class, it's Dr. T with a brief tutorial on this assignment for week 6. During week 6, you are creating an evidence-based plan to promote health and wellness of a particular vulnerable population in a specific community. The community should be the community in which you reside, where you have access to understanding that vulnerable population and the community in which the vulnerable population resides. In this case, I'm giving you some example from a community in Massachusetts, and the population that I chose was the mentally ill homeless population in Greenfield, Massachusetts. So you identify your vulnerable population, be sure I have approved it, and you identify the specific geographic community, meaning the city and the state in which you are looking at that population. If it's a very large city, sometimes it isn't the whole city that you're looking at. It might be a particular section of the city that you are interested in. On the other hand, if it's a very spread out rural area, you might be looking at a particular county where there is a special vulnerable population that you are giving consideration to. You're going to begin the paper with a title page. Make sure you do that. Make sure it's APA formatted. Remember, every paper you write has to have an introduction. Please provide a background of what vulnerable populations are, why it's necessary to promote health and wellness, and you're also looking at the ethnic and cultural backgrounds and influences for this population, so you could identify that too in your opening introduction. I remind you again, please do not use any personal pronouns anywhere in this paper, including pronouns like we or us. Don't say I, don't say we, don't say us. Remember, you're going to do a specific population in a specific community. You will start out with your introduction, as I said. The introduction should end with a clear thesis statement. What is a thesis statement? A thesis statement identifies the purpose of the paper. The purpose of this paper is to describe the vulnerable population of whichever vulnerable population you identified. Identify the resources that serve to promote health for this population, and to develop a health promotion and wellness plan of action that is sensitive to the cultural, ethnic, and social background of this population. So in this case, with my example, it's the vulnerable population of the mentally ill homeless in Greenfield, Massachusetts. That would be your main top title, centered. Then the next heading, which would be left justified, would be the name of your population and the location. So in this case, I've said the mentally ill homeless in Greenfield. Maybe your population you chose are obese adolescents in a city in Maryland, whatever. So it has to be, you identify your vulnerable population. You're going to have to discuss it under this section. You will have to explain why this population qualifies as an at-risk population. Look at some of the criteria I put in the course under where you're choosing your vulnerable population. Does your population fit the criteria for being at risk? Are they marginalized, for example? Is this a group of people who do not have easy access to care, who are impacted by societal influences that don't provide them the resources that they might need? For example, the mentally ill homeless. Then you're looking at the health concerns for that population. Make sure you identify the specific health concerns. Pick out the health concerns that you believe are most specific. I wouldn't pick out a lot of health concerns. Do the broad health concerns because you could have a very long list here. So identify the really important health concerns, like, for example, the mentally ill homeless would be some major health concerns, obviously, would be health concerns related to their mental illness. Safety is a health concern. Security, safety, and shelter for the homeless is a health concern. Follow up on chronic illnesses. When you look up your population, you should find what are some of the key health issues that are specific to that population. The one I chose really has quite a list. When you think of someone who's out in the streets without any shelter, who is also mentally ill, likely chronically ill, probably has a psychiatric diagnosis in addition to an addiction or possibly a number of chronic illnesses. It could be someone who's addicted to either drugs or alcohol or both. So you're going to have a section on that, health concerns. Then you're going to identify the resources that would help with these health concerns, that would promote health. Be very careful here because you're supposed to be identifying existing resources in the identified community. You can't just make the resources up. Look in your community and see how your community has identified this population that you have chosen and what the community is doing about it. For example, if it's the mentally ill homeless in Greenfield, Massachusetts, does the city of Greenfield provide shelters for these homeless? Are there clinic resources for them to help them with their physical illnesses, and are there psychiatric supports for this population? What resources are in the community? Don't just make that up. It has to be specific to your community, so you're going to have to look it up in your community. Then you're going to identify high quality electronic sources of healthcare information. See what you can find in the internet sources about this population. For example, there's a lot on the internet about supporting the mentally ill homeless. If I were writing this paper with this specific focus, I'm sure I would easily find sources. I would qualify this section here to say it is sources for you as the healthcare provider, as opposed to the population in this case anyhow. I certainly wouldn't be looking at high quality electronic sources to provide to the homeless mentally ill because I wouldn't think they have easy access to it. You might be able to do that if your population were a group of individuals you felt could access the internet. Maybe you're looking at high-risk teens who are high risk of pregnancy. They could access and would probably be computer savvy, so you might be able to provide sources for them that are electronic. So use your clinical and astute judgment about whether or not your population would be accessing these sources. So spin this according to your population. In this case, I would not be saying these are sources for direct sources for my population. I might say they're sources for the development of some informational tools that I could provide to them, or posters or something. Then you're going to go to the next section, which is entitled Evidence-Based Health Plan. You're going to put that heading down, and then you're going to create an evidence-based plan to promote health and wellness in this at-risk population. I think if I were doing this, I would probably identify the key health concerns that I had identified in the beginning of the paper and develop a plan to address those health concerns. That's why I'm encouraging you to distill those health concerns to maybe 2 or 3 major concerns for that population. I wouldn't make it more than that because you're developing a plan. Keep your mind and focus on this population as being outside of the acute care setting. So you have to be thinking far more globally and thinking in population health terms. These plans of care for them or evidence-based plan is a plan that would be implemented within the community resources, not in acute care. So keep that in mind. Then put in a section on how culture, ethnicity, and social background can affect the plan of care that you have identified. And what are the strategies that you would put into place that would address these concerns? Make sure you have a separate section there. For each one of these where it's looking at, for example, create the plan, you'd identify the plan. I'd probably have, if I had 3 health concerns, I would have health concern 1, 2, and 3, identifying that, and I would then give another topic on how culture, ethnicity, and social background is going to impact the plan and what specific strategies would help to alleviate any a negative impact. Then you would end with a conclusion. You always have a conclusion to your paper. Make sure you summarize the paper and highlight 4 significant points. Make sure you end with a reference page. A reference page is always a separate page. It never starts at the end of a paragraph that you're concluding with. It's always on a separate page. Make sure you're following APA formatting for the reference page. Make sure you're using in-text citations. Make certain that your in-text citations are referring to your reference list. So, for example, for everything on your reference list, there should be an in-text citation. If you have not cited what's on the reference list, then it shouldn't be on the reference list. There's a distinct difference between a reference list and a bibliography. You are creating a reference list, which means you're providing the full references for the citations within your paper. Make certain that you are using credible articles from peer-reviewed professional journals. In your case, because you're nurses, it's so important for you to look into the nursing literature too and address your population from a nursing perspective. That doesn't have to be the only references you have, but it should have a strong influence. People are going to ask how long this paper should be. I'm not sure how long it should be, but there's a number of sections here. I would expect you're going to have an 8 to 12 page paper at least with this, and encourage you to be sure that each section of the paper is rich with detail and has strong citations. Please let me know if you have any questions.